Today, the journey takes us to eastern Germany. From Lake Müritz, we travel the Mecklenburg Lake District to Rheinsberg and Lake Stechlin. The route follows the Havel River to Berlin, and from there along the Spree River into the Spree floodplains of Brandenburg. Daybreak on Rederangsee. The lake is a way station for thousands of cranes as they migrate southwards. The starting point for today's journey is Lake Müritz. The biggest lake in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, lies at the heart of a lake district formed during the last ice age. More than 36 fish species live in Lake Müritz: pike, perch, carp, and there are numerous breeding ponds. It is the region of the Müritz fishermen who have been practicing traditional fishing here for decades and smoke the fish themselves.
Oh wow, perfect again. That's how they're supposed to look. Beautiful fish.
Prachtexemplare.
Through the fish-rich Müritz tributary called Alte Fahrt, we head south on the Miro chain of lakes in a canoe. Many of the shores of the waterways here are still protected against development by a law from the times of the former East Germany. Some 10 kilometers further, the view opens up to Lake Miro, a paradise for paddlers. The lake is roughly 2 kilometers long and up to 700 meters wide, surrounded by woods and meadows. Its shores offer little bays with sandy beaches, inviting visitors to take a swim. Along the way, some side channel entrances are overgrown with water lilies and reeds. Some ways can only be found with instructions from the locals. Through channels and many more lakes, the tour takes us to Rheinsberg, some 20 kilometers away. This small city is known from mentions in the books of Kurt Tucholsky and Theodor Fontana, but not only from there. The place is also inextricably linked to Rheinsberg Palace and the Hohenzollern dynasty. In the 18th century, Frederick the Great received it as a gift from his father, Frederick William I. The Prussian king is said to have loved the palace, which is regarded as a Rococo masterpiece. Behind the estate, a stream starts, the Rheinsberger Rhin. With a gradient of 17 meters, the stream flows in a southerly direction. The watercourse is open exclusively to kayaks, which have enough room under the bow. Even then, the little Rhin is only open for runs in summer when the water level is sufficient. Paddlers will find their skills and concentration tested by the strong current. We continue from the Rhin to Lake Stechlin. The lake is 70 meters deep and one of the most fabled places in eastern Germany. Countless myths swirl around it, not least due to an eponymous novel by writer Theodor Fontane. But Lake Stechlin is more than just a storied body of water. It is also a nature reserve and home to many creatures, not only in the water. For more than 50 years, it has been the subject of scientific research. One of the largest lake laboratories in the world, operated by the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries, is based here. 24 cylinders with a diameter of roughly 9 meters extend deep below the surface. They serve as test pools in which to investigate global phenomena like climate change. The lake functions as a sort of seismograph for environmental changes. The director of the station is Stella Berger. She is a limnologist, or in lay terms, someone who studies inland waters. Together with her colleagues, she regularly heads out on Lake Stechlin as dusk falls. The scientists are studying the impact of the increase in artificial light on the underwater world. How does the human-made brightness of settled areas unsettle the natural day-night rhythm of the natural world? Stella Berger and her colleagues want to understand the effects of so-called light pollution on inland waters. Far away from large cities, Lake Stechlin is an ideal place to conduct the research. It still gets truly dark here at night. What happens in the water when the researchers shine light into it?
On each of the test cylinders, we set up equipment in which we simulate artificial, in fact very weak light, which we refer to as skylights. The light from cities that is reflected back from clouds or particles in the air. Very, very low light intensities that meet the surface of the water here. We can simulate that here, and we want to know if such low light intensities also have an effect on certain aquatic organisms.
The researchers worry that small animals like water fleas may not swim to the surface at night to eat plankton because it's too bright for them there. Only sufficient darkness offers them concealment and protects them against being eaten themselves. What impact would this behavior have on the food chain and the nutrient balance of the water? Stella Berger is studying whether the plankton populations in the illuminated basins have grown more rapidly because tiny organisms like water fleas no longer come to the surface to feed. She takes samples at different times. The work can be tedious. The samples are evaluated the next day. The flow cam measures the number of living things in the water. Like in a dragnet investigation, the device measures the number of all aquatic microorganisms in the water. The study is not yet finished, but there are many indications that the plankton have indeed grown in number, and thus that the scientists' concern is valid. But Stella Berger's job also has more pleasant sides.
It's really a lot of fun to work at Lake Stechlin, I have to admit. It's an area that people come to spend their holidays. We get to work here. I think it's one of the most beautiful workplaces a person could imagine.
The tour continues southwards through multiple waterways of the Rupin forest and lake region. Lake Gudelach has a small island, Werder Island. It is the size of 60 football pitches and was purchased by a Berlin lawyer in 2007 for €150,000 on one condition. The island cannot be developed and must be accessible to the public. The Inselkind nature biotope was created in that spirit. Families and groups can holiday here. Guests sleep in tents and cooking is done on improvised fire pits. The gardens grow fruit and vegetables. An untouched wonderland, run and kept in good shape by a handful of helpers. The trip continues by way of the Rhin through Ostprignitz and the Rupin Switzerland Nature Reserve. It's still about 50 kilometers to the confluence with the Havel near Oranienburg. In certain areas, motorboats are only allowed to travel very slowly and quietly. The verdant shorelines are breeding grounds and habitat for many aquatic birds. Rampant boat traffic would threaten their existence. The area is home not only to swans, but also grey herons, who wheel above the fish-rich lakes and channels. Even otters are seen from time to time. The gently sloping overgrown shorelines are an ideal habitat for them. Because humans have straightened rivers, dirtied waterways, and hunted the small creatures, their numbers have dropped precipitously. In some places, the otter is absent altogether. In Germany, contiguous populations are found only in the east, as here in Rupin, Switzerland. Mallard ducks have proved hardier, but even they require tranquility and places of sanctuary in order to raise their young. We proceed towards Berlin on the 14-kilometer-long Lake Rupin aboard a solar-powered houseboat. Along the way, we pass the Brandenburg city of Neu-Ruppin, birthplace of the writer Theodor Fontane. Lake Rupin is the largest reservoir in the region and was formed at the end of the last ice age. With sweltering summers and minimal rainfall, however, its level has dropped dramatically in recent years. A wake-up call. A few meters later, the boat reaches Alt-Friesach and its historic registered lock. It lifts the waterway for boat traffic. At the same time, Lake Rupin is dammed here to keep the surrounding moorlands from drying out. But that is an increasingly difficult task due to the hot and dry summers. Lake Lenitz is located some 30 kilometers north of Berlin, near Oranienburg. This is where one might encounter Jessica Lee. The landscape historian with Canadian-Taiwanese roots conducts field research in her bathing suit.
I'm Jessica J. Lee. I'm an author and a swimmer. I spent a year swimming a different lake every week for the entire year in and around Berlin.
Testing the waters of the capital region in all seasons. She has published her experiences along the way on her blog and in a book.
I mean, one of the big things I noticed that when I moved to Germany and I started swimming around Berlin, you know, the lakes here were they were completely different from what I knew back in Canada or from other places I'd swum. You know, there might be more sand here, and so the water would have this incredibly clear, sharp quality. Or, you know, if you'd swim in a forest lake, a Waldsee, you know, you get this lovely sort of quality of the forest around you. You get the soil, you get the leaves, you get all of it in the water, and you can really feel that sort of velvet sensation in the water when you're swimming. So I found that, you know, in each different place that I swam, I would get to know it sort of through sensation and through those minute differences, and it always told me a lot about the landscape itself.
In her book, Jessica Lee also describes her feelings about the mystical world of water.
I was really afraid as a child of lakes. I would look at them and just think they were the most horrifying things. They were dark, and you know, you'd look down and think, I don't want to put my feet in that, I don't want to get in there, I don't know what's in there. And I carried that fear into adulthood, so when I started swimming really regularly, it was this constant process of sort of working that out and remembering to breathe and to look at the shoreline around me and just remember how beautiful it was. There's something really special to me about being able to get into a lake anywhere I go, or any body of water anywhere that I visit, and to feel like I could get to know the place a bit differently because the water was there and I had that possibility. I do think that, you know, something has to change at the end of the day. When we have rivers that we can't swim in or lakes that are unswimmable, when we have concerns about water quality and, you know, not just our livelihoods as people, but, you know, the well-being of the entire sort of ecosystem and the range of sort of biodiversity that's in a waterway, it's just not really a sustainable approach. We need to have waterways that actually work on every level.
Via the Havel, the journey takes us to the north of Berlin. On the green, water-rich outskirts of the capital, we observe a trendy sport that has come to waters everywhere in the past few years: stand-up paddleboarding. Stand-up paddling is said to have been invented by Polynesian fishermen off Tahiti. Surfing instructors in Hawaii, too, use this means of travel to move back and forth between the shore and the wave-breaking reefs further out. The ideal place, however, is here. Calm rivers with minimal wave action like the Havel. A bit of concentration and balance is all it takes to take a walk on the water. Where the Havel flows into the Spree, the journey reaches central Berlin. The banks of the Westhafen Canal bear witness to a time when shipping played a major role in Berlin. This site was once the home of the second largest inland port in Germany. The center of Berlin, with its unmistakable mix of eternal construction sites, industrial wastelands, and modern architecture. In the Tiergarten, the Spree and the Landwehr Canal splinter into human-made streams and ponds. An interloper has made itself at home here. Originally from America, it has taken up residence in Berlin's waters, and the impact on local flora and fauna is substantial. Louisiana crawfish have become a mass phenomenon in Berlin. It is assumed that they were released by pet shop retailers and rapidly reproduced. 39,000 of them were caught in Tiergarten alone in a single year. One person is delighted by the little crustaceans, however, pensioner and fishing hobbyist Klaus Hidder. He is the man charged with catching them. But what to do with the little critters? Berliners have found a way of getting rid of them. They simply eat them. Klaus Hidder sells his catch to restaurateurs, and the crawfish are served as a delicacy, although there are concerns about contamination with heavy metals. As disruptive invasives, however, the pincered creatures are little lamented by environmentalists. They eat plants and feed on fish spawn. A ribbon of water surrounds and crisscrosses Berlin. The Spree flows right through the government district. When the country was divided, it was the border between East and West. Today, it bisects federal parliament buildings. Those wishing to go from the Paul Löbe House to the Marie Elisabeth Lüders House can cross a pedestrian bridge, however. That the city is closely associated with water can be seen in its name. Berlin is said to be derived from an Old Slavic word for swamp. Berlin is literally place in the swamp. The heart of the city, the Berlin Cathedral and museums around it, are therefore built on mighty wooden piles. A few meters further on, the Kupfergraben splits off the Spree. In the 19th century, it was abuzz with cargo ship traffic. Before the creation of railway networks, the majority of all goods were delivered here. But for roughly the past 100 years, the Kupfergraben has been all but unused. A situation that rankles two visionaries. They plan to clean up a 1.6-kilometer section of the waterway and breathe new life into a once neglected space in the heart of Berlin. Brothers Tim and Jan Edler want to see people swimming in the Spree again at the Museum Island in the center of the city. There was indeed a public swimming facility here in 1925. Today, swimming in the Spree in the center of Berlin is strictly prohibited for safety reasons.
We're architects, or a mix of architect and artist, and do projects that are sort of at the boundary between the disciplines. It really comes from a manner of working, going through the city with eyes wide open, or just being in the city and seeing what kinds of potential you can discover, which has been untapped until now.
The biggest problem in this project is hygiene. In Berlin, in some cases, waste and rainwater are drained through the same sewer. When heavy rains occur, the sewer system overflows and fecal matter is drained into the Spree. This brings harmful bacteria into the river. The brothers believe they have found a solution for this problem. Aboard a recycled boat, they test various filters with which to clean the water. Plants will also be used to ensure swimmable water quality. The Edlers are now supported financially by the federal government.
In every city that has installed steps at its waterways, it automatically becomes a place where people gather. People have a huge affinity to water, and yet they can only just dip their toes into it. If you look at our parks today, which have also transformed from being places where you quietly spend some time into places where people play a lot of sports, it's not difficult to imagine what will happen if we enable that for the water as well.
The River Swimming Initiative regularly draws attention to the project with a very special campaign.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
When there has been no heavy rain and the water quality is adequate, the association hosts an annual River Swimming Cup. Sporty Berliners square off in a festive swimming competition.
The River Swim event is an attempt to reclaim the river for the people in this section and whet people's appetite for more. And shouldn't we reclaim the river as a source of life for the people rather than using it as a sewer and conduit for boat traffic? And we think that the Spree Canal is at exactly the right place, at the catalytic center of the city of Berlin, to address this issue, and in conjunction with that, the issue of sustainable urban development. In other words, how will we live in cities in the future? And this is the right place to ask these questions and put them to the people.
In the future, the water utilities want to install new weirs and thereby reduce the risk of overflow out of the sewer system, a major step towards a clean river. Plans envision that by 2025 at the latest, 100 years after the closure of the erstwhile swimming spot, people will be able to swim in the Spree on any given day.
Congratulations once again, number 500. You are the first.
Overall, it's really just about making the canal accessible again. It won't be a public facility, there won't be any admission charge. The water area will simply be made accessible, as it always should be, unless there are important reasons for it not to be.
We follow the Spree southeast, towards the Oberbaumbrücke. In this former industrial area, where the three districts of Kreuzberg, Treptow and Friedrichshain meet, today the riverbanks attract alternative communities, artists and prosperous companies. Further on towards Köpenick, past the Rummelsburger Bucht, a colourful architectural hodgepodge of villas and industrial facilities. Shoreline plots bear witness to the coexistence of completely different residential concepts, from houseboats to villas with docks. It's a good life on Berlin's shores. Then the Spree flows through the most expansive lake in the city, the Müggelsee. While some enjoy their leisure time here, a fisherman and his daughter are at work. Andreas Tam is the last commercial fisherman on the Müggelsee. He's been setting his fish traps here for over 35 years. The family possesses old fishing rights granted by the Elector, which have been passed down the generations. His daughter, Maria, will inherit the fishery one day. Every morning at 5 a.m., The two of them go out on the lake to catch zander, eels and perch. And there are a good deal more of them in Lake Müggelsee than one might imagine. We continue down the Müggelspree in a small motorboat. There is a very unique residential settlement in the Spree Delta. Countless canals and bridges gave it the name New Venice. During East German times, ruling party functionaries had their dachas here. Many of the wood houses are still here today, alongside large mansions and many new homes. A mishmash of widely divergent architectural styles. We traverse a series of lakes en route to the Dahme, a 95-kilometer-long tributary of the Spree. On it we cross the city limits and enter the federal state of Brandenburg. Some 60 kilometers later, the Spreewald begins, a vast network of intertwined waterways. Here in the Biosphere Reserve, Stefan Lohr and two fellow bartenders from Berlin have opened a whiskey distillery. At their in-house mill, they grind rye and mix it with hot water. Yeast is added to the mash and the mixture pumped into a fermentation tank. The sugar ferments into something like beer in the intermediate steps, just without hops. Finally, the alcohol is aromatically distilled.
As bartenders, my partners and I have always loved rye whiskey. We just love its pungency, the flavor of the rye, and because it's a niche and a bit trickier than anything else, it just fell into our laps. Brandenburg is also well known for having some of the best rye in the world. Many whiskies, including American ones, buy their rye here because it is of such high quality. We have the good fortune that one town over, the Farmers Cooperative raises a lot of rye. We get our rye from there and then make a 100% unmalted rye whiskey called Stork Club Straight Rye Whiskey.
The high-proof beverage then matures in 3 different types of barrels made of German and American oak. Before bottling, these different types are married, as the jargon has it, according to a house recipe. The whiskey distilled here is named after the region's symbol, the stork. Canoeing in the Spreewald. Its network of natural watercourses and artificial channels adds up to a total length of nearly 1,000 kilometers. The area is not just a natural landscape, but also a cultural one.
Durch den Spreewald, durch den Spreewald. Durch den Spreewald lasst uns ziehen, das wär unsere größte Lust.
This Spreewald retiree is keeping an old tradition. He earns the lockkeeper's penny, a small consideration paid to him for services by travellers passing through the lock.
So, liebe Spreewaldfreunde, darf ich Sie fragen? Kennen Sie den Spreewald schon oder sind Sie neu? Mach was Schönes aus diesem Tag. Jeder Tag ist ein Stück deines Lebens. Lebe keine Sekunde vergebens, mach was Schönes aus diesem Tag. Dankeschön.
Along the way through the Spreewald, one can pass as many as 60 locks. Most of them are designed so that paddlers can easily operate them. The Spreewald is a fish-rich biosphere reserve that also provides sufficient food for the stork, the heraldic animal of the region. But the large migratory bird needs more than fish. It also depends on agriculture. On the harvested fields, it finds mice, frogs, snakes and worms to sate its appetite. The storks of the Spreewald are known as east migrators. In autumn they fly to the Balkans, the Bosphorus or even South Africa. The swarming starling is one of the most common birds in Brandenburg. In contrast to all other federal states of Germany, it is not classified as threatened here. And yet, the steady decline of its population is nevertheless causing concern. The Spreewald Kahn boat. Some farmers still take them to their fields or simply to go shopping. It was once the most important mode of transport on the canals and streams. Today, the boats are more often used to ferry visitors through the Spreewald. In the district of Lübbenau-Leder, the Kahn is still used to deliver the post. The journey continues southwards and soon reaches the Spree floodplains near Cottbus. Here, a section of the Spree has been transformed into a flourishing biotope through restoration. A large energy company was obliged to offset the impact of destroying a piece of natural landscape at a different location where it extracted coal. The idea was to return the Spree floodplains to their original condition. But what did that look like?
We have been regulating the courses of rivers since the end of the Middle Ages. It's important to bear in mind that before the railways, the waterways were the main form of transport. So we have always regulated rivers, and that continued. After the war, people were hungry and goods were scarce. And that continued, so people drained the floodplains in order to farm them. It's hard to understand today, but the needs were different then, and so many river landscapes in Central Europe were more or less reduced to being water highways.
Hydraulic engineer Christoph Gerstgraser managed the transition. It was no small task, for at the time the Spree had almost nothing in common with its original state.
In the 1980s, it was all cut off and the Spree was completely straightened here and the river dammed. There was no current, and we have now restored this meander connection. There is now a current again. You hear this burbling. Then gravel was put back in, current variation, habitat variation. It's a beautiful section that has been restored here.
New ponds were created, river straightenings reversed, frogs and toads brought back in. A total of 150,000 amphibians were moved manually. The result is a local recreation area.
In
this section here, we are standing in a rock ramp, which means that the new section has a higher position than the old section. In order to compensate for the elevation difference, so that the fish can migrate upstream, we built this rock ramp. The current speeds are now in a range that the fish can handle, and which allows different species and age groups to migrate upstream.
The measures took 7 years to carry out. Much has changed since then.
In this aerial view, we can see how the Spree looked before the implementation of our measures. You can see the dead straight course of the Spree, the water was held back and there was no current. Here we can see in 2009 the initial implementation of the engineering measures. One has the idea this is the course of the river. The river doesn't look the same the whole time, but instead you see this change, this intrinsic dynamism, and that is the intention. Now you suddenly see multiple courses. It's turning green. The vegetation has stabilized and developed. At some point, there's a phase of organic stability when the trees are tall, and then another big event happens, and there's another major restructuring.
Our journey through eastern Germany ends in the Spree floodplains. This trip along the waterways shows their historical and environmental importance for the region. It makes clear just how fragile the nature is around lakes, rivers and canals. Humans have repeatedly shaped water landscapes to suit their needs, and will continue to do so in the future.